go. We are recording too.
Excellent. So I know there were some things that you wanted to talk about on the last live, and obviously Mike wasn't there to discuss it with you. We're all here now. So yeah, just kind of throw out some stuff that you guys would think that you guys think would be useful, and to anyone who's watching, just stick your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them as soon as we can.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So I'm going to put you on. Who's giving us a sad react?
Seth.
That's rude, isn't it? All right. Anyway, cool. Oh.
It was me.
Thanks, Mike. All right, Mike. What have you been practicing this week?
This morning, my practice hasn't been very good recently because I've been practicing other things outside the guitar.
Our internet bad. Did I just hear that right? Using your own joke against you there.
Nice. No, I've been doing a lot of singing recently. So I've been practicing singing every day for half an hour. And then, getting ready for so I've been doing a lot of, but
all that stuff, yeah.
You know that's not as cool as the guitar. That's why
it's not. It's very frustrating. But I did some practice this morning, and the two big things for me recently, I usually have about 3 or 4 things that I want to achieve, and then I just bounce around. I'm not too structured with my practice. I bounce around between kind of what I fancy. I always start with picking. I've been inspired by the G4 picking exercises.
Excellent.
I usually do about 15 minutes of that picking, and then apart from that,
just picking.
Picking. Yeah. I set an alarm for 15 minutes because before my singing practice, I did. I was getting up to Jimmy numbers in my practice. I did a I did a 9-hour day once, and it was setting kind of 15-minute alarms, and it was 15 minutes of. Usually it's been 15 minutes before I bring in my fretting hand at all. So just lots and lots of things with this, and lots of different stuff with the metronome. And apart from that, it's been arpeggios, really arpeggios.
Nice.
Picking 2, usually 1 chord, and figuring out all the arpeggios up and down the fretboard. And that's been me really, and a bit of country picking as well.
Excellent.
Nice.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I hope, because I'm sort of changing my screen a bit, I hope that's not coming across on the live video, but I'm trying to do it so I've got the Facebook stuff as well. But we've already got a couple of questions. So question number 1 from Sev. What top 3 scales would you recommend to learning solos? Anyone want to take that?
Well, I can answer that one. Of course, Seb, you already know this, but our old friend, the pentatonic, well, particularly the minor pentatonic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is so versatile. You can use that in pretty much anything. And also, what's nice about the pentatonics as well is that once you've learned the shapes for the pentatonics, you then just have to make a couple of adjustments, and then you can play other scales as well, and other, so for example, the blues scale, it's just 1 extra note. Nice. So that's and I'm sure you guys would agree with that, unless Jimmy wants to throw in a curveball.
No, not really. Pentatonics are great. They're very guitar friendly. They're just 2 notes per string, and that you've got A minor, or you've got C major there as well. So it's kind of like 2 scales in 1. For me personally, I like these scales because they sit right over they're like a kind of blueprint over, I guess, like your fuller scales, so like your actual major scales. So instead of nope, not there. So you kind of got the scale notes underneath you, which I think is quite useful if you ever want to add a bit of contrast. So for me, your pentatonics, and then just learning your major scale everywhere, so instead of your pentatonic, you have your major scale there too. Yeah, and it's really kind of useful to be able to swap, because if you know that, you can relate that to a chord, and then you've got all your arpeggios in that same area too. So I guess arpeggios for more jazz stuff, but yeah, just your pentatonics because it's a framework for everything, but then learn your major scale. So I don't know if that was just too waffly or whatever, but that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, you know, I guess from a theory perspective, it's always useful to know the major scale because everything else kind of comes from it, doesn't it? So, but once you know the major scale as well, and you understand about modes, which is a bit more advanced, but once you know the major scale, then you can at least have a go at playing the modes as well, because it's just starting and ending on different.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I don't even think of in terms of modes. I'm just like, it's all just the major scale. Like, I'm not going to overcomplicate it or anything like that. So I find that very useful. But yeah, and then just the other thing, I guess, is more focusing on phrasing rather than, because for me,
just learning the scales.
Yeah, so what's that? Pentatonics, i.e. major and minors, yep. The other thing for me is actually understanding phrasing within certain shapes. So if I've got a pentatonic, I like to think, yeah, what else can I do there? I can play them as double stops where we play like 2 notes in a row. And, you know, you get these sorts of sounds. And, you know, and there's a lot you can do with just, you know, within the scale and just kind of really exploring what notes sound good when they bend. You know, things that you can hammer off and pull on, you know, hammer on and pull off even. And just understand where your intervals are. So there's quite a lot to work around, even just within the pentatonic. So, I mean, that's something that we could probably do a full class on as well, and just how you can kind of get different sounds and stuff, and one note you can add in to make different, or, you know, make it sound very bluesy, and it's just adding in one note, and yeah. So, yeah, pentatonics. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always home as well as being good. Because I was working over when I was practicing earlier, I was practicing my arpeggios, and I was trying a few fancy things with them, trying different arpeggios over different chords, but that's another thing. But I was going wrong a lot. But it's having that security as well, that once I've gone, I know where home is. I always know where home is. It's always here. So it doesn't matter how wrong I get. There's all the minor pentatonic or major, if we're there, is always going to be home, nice and easy. Nice and makes you feel secure knowing that there's a home.
Exactly. Yeah. One last thing I guess I want to add to that is you can use more than one pentatonic. I think Vicki accidentally sat in on a class where I was talking about this on my Wednesday students. But for example, if you're in A minor, you've got.
Accidentally sit in on the class. I meant to actually sit in on the class. Just suddenly
checking up on me, making sure I'm not all waffle. So if we're in A minor, for example,
I'll give you a chord, Jimmy, if you like.
Yes, please. We can have A minor. That's kind of your home base. But we can also play the E minor pentatonic because all the notes are still in the scale. Bear in mind. And it just gives it a completely different feel. Yeah. So my kind of way of thinking about that is just go up a fifth from your minor. So if you think of A, so we have A, B, C, D, E, and then you can also play that kind of pentatonic as well. Yeah, so you can get two completely different sounding things using the same scale, but just starting on a different point. So A minor, E minor, they both work over any C major kind of progression or A minor progression. So that's something that we can look at, and I'll probably do a lesson on that for you guys if you want it. But yeah, and I guess just to have a quick look in there, any top tips for singing practice, Mike?
It's just practice. Again, it sounds it's overly simple, but people think that they can sing or they can't sing, and I've been practicing that when you get higher, you have to go into. I won't spend too long on this because I know we're playing guitar and it's a guitar school. But something I've been working on is when you go higher with an R sound, you have to turn it into an ah sound. Ah, you have to physically change the part, and all of these take a lot of practice to be able to feel like that. So probably have to find a teacher, I'd say. Probably, probably find
explain that a bit better.
Find a teacher and practice, because the reason I've been practicing is because I'm redoing vocals for album recorded with my band, and and because of my practice is erratic, sometimes I feel great and I sound great, and half the time I don't, and it's really frustrating. So I think we can, I think I've seen it in students that we can feel the same about our guitar playing as well, because of, I've had it with lots and lots of students and with my own playing as well, that one week someone can do something absolutely brilliant, and then, a month later, if not much practice has been happening, it's not gone, but that feel good flair isn't there anymore. Just keeping up. I think probably not binging practice. I'd rather do, it's be better for singing and guitar playing to do, 5 minutes a day rather than an hour once a week, I would say.
Yeah,
really.
Yes.
Even though an hour is much more than 5 minutes a day, an hour once a week, it's not as good at all. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Nice. We've, I'm kind of just interjecting with questions here.
Yeah, I'm looking at Ruben's question here, Jimmy.
Yes.
I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna let you take that one.
All right, I'll give my hot take for this. So, how do you play riffs and chord sequences that are really hard and really fast better? So, for me, slow it down. Slow it right down. Yeah. So anything that you've got that's too fast, I think I said this last time, but if you can play something slowly, you can play it quickly. But if you can't play it slowly, there's no way on earth that you're going to be able to play it quickly. So just slow it down to a point that feels even ridiculously too slow, kind of like 50 BPM or something like that if you need to. Because when it's that slow. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and sorry, I know we were going to talk about this anyway, but now would be a good time to bring in the use of the metronome and why it's so important, because you want to be able to measure. One of the reasons why we use the metronome is so you can measure how fast you can play something. So if you know how fast what you want to play is supposed to be, right, and you go in and you immediately, so I'm thinking of Junior 2, is it the Simpsons theme, right? Which has got this ridiculously fast tempo, and what usually happens is everyone can play the notes, but they can't play it fast enough. So what you want to do is find a metronome speed that you can play these really hard and fast riffs and chord sequences, and find a metronome speed that you can comfortably play that at, even if it's nowhere near the speed that you need to get to, but then you at least know where you are, and then how, where you've got to get to from there.
See, I would do that, but that speed that you are comfortable with, I would take that down 10, 20, 30 BPM and play it even slower. So, because it's very hard when you've got a lot of spacing and you have to know exactly when to commit to playing those rhythms. And if you can internalize that at a very slow tempo, you can really analyze if you're doing up picks, down picks, and you can really work out and commit at that speed. Then when you speed it up, you've trained your hand, you know exactly what's going on. Because often, especially with fast riffs, it's more likely going to be a problem with your right hand than your left hand, and it's usually the most overlooked thing. So and
that's where all the picking practice comes in.
Absolutely.
There we go. So I know it sounds boring, but a metronome and play it really, really slowly. Anything I do, I'm sure Mike is the same. That especially with some of those country licks that we've both been trying to do, slowing it right down and just spending a day. If it's meant to be 300 BPM, run it at 60 BPM for a week, then speed up once you've solidified it. Yeah. It is time consuming, but it is the way to get very, very good and very accurate with your playing, is to play it slowly and then build up to speed once you're confident at a slow tempo. Mike, anything to add on that?
Yeah, all of that is absolutely spot on, especially with the picking, because of if you start analyzing things and then actually sometimes when I do this, the picking is different. That is definitely slowing you down. I see it with people when I talk about coming off of fast playing for a second, how people build their chords. It's like at first we can't fall on our chords, so you have to go one finger at a time. And I see people making their chord in different ways. So sometimes they go first finger, second finger, third finger, and then they go second, third. And this is somewhere in your brain being decided, and it makes it a split second slower. So practice so that you do the movement one way every single time, and then it becomes automatic because of there's no decision to be made. I make this every single time, and I pick this the same way every single time. And apart from that, something was helping me because actually building up my speed, because I'm quite a slow player, I would say, and I think a part of that is because I'm left-handed. I know this is a fixed mindset. I will break it, but it's because I'm left-handed. Yeah.
Surely you're left-handed or right-handed?
Well, because it's this, isn't it? It's doing this movement that
Right.
like that's good for picking, and I can't do that very well. If you guys try and do that with your left hand, have a go.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's something I've been working on a lot, and something which really helps me is because I usually do these, and then initially I was just doing exercises and then trying to build them up, build them up, build them up. But apart from that, I think something that's useful is to do bursts as well. So if I was doing, instead of just doing this and then gradually getting quicker and quicker and quicker, I think we should be doing that for sure. But then also little bursts, because of playing the whole thing really fast once you build to there is a lot. So doing things where you have little bursts of speed, because you're not going to be able to keep up loads of speed in one go. Just breaking, I suppose it's coming down to breaking things into bite-sized chunks again, and to have little bursts of speed here and there, because it's too exhausting and too much for our brains to think about. If that makes sense, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that absolutely made sense. Yeah.
Another thing about speed for me as well is the exercise. And a big thing for me was I was in my head, I'm always going fingers 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Actually, when saying those words in my head becomes too, if it gets too fast, I can't do it. I can't say that in my head. So actually breaking it down into chunks where when it gets faster, I'm not saying 1 2 3 4 1. I'm saying 1 1 1 1 1 1. And so you're just thinking like one, and you've done the slow practice that Jimmy's talking about. So you know that movement inside out. It's in your fingers already, and you just think about the chunk of 4. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Sev has asked, can we have a country lesson to include some stuff from your own practice, Mike?
Country lesson, yeah.
Not right now, but maybe
Yeah.
Tuesday evening.
Absolutely, but country music is the one where people have violent reactions towards it from people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see faces pulled as soon as.
Yeah, I remember when we tried to do country with the blues class, and there was mutiny, wasn't there?
Yeah, not happening.
It works though. It works. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
I like a bit of country. Yeah.
No, that.
Cool. All right. So structuring practice was another thing that we can probably talk a little bit about now, right?
Yes. Anyone want to take
Jimmy,
that
you're
one?
the master. Well, you're the master on this because I have to. I do other stuff.
It's not my fault I don't have any other friends except for you two. All right. Yeah. All right. So practice structuring. I actually have.
You're going to do a 9-hour practice. No, I'm only joking.
I have a few different practice routines based on how much time I actually have to practice. I think that's one. And as I think I said last time, just having a balance So for me, I divide my practice into 7 sections. So I have a melody, which is a broad term for anything where I'm playing one note at a time. So scales, arpeggios, licks, things like that. Harmony, anything to do with chords. Rhythm, anything to do with rhythm. I also do things like transcription, sight reading, repertoire is a good one, learning songs and applying your skills, which is kind of what you guys will be doing with your G4 method anyway. But I always warm up. And in my warm up, I include a lot of technique stuff. So I think I'm more than happy to. Is it worth like me posting some files in? Kind of give you a few brief examples. Is that a thing?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So every time I pick up my guitar, my metronome goes on, and I do the chromatic. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And the key for me on this one is making sure I've got arched, none of my fingers go down flat. And by the time I get to the 4th, so even there, even though it looks kind of thing, I've got a bend in both joints of my finger. But by the time I get to my 4th finger, all my fingers are on the fretboard. Yeah, and then back. But if it's difficult there and you find it's too much of a stretch, start further up the neck where the frets are closer together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this builds finger independence, it builds you stretch, things like that. And then I would do like a different variation, something like that, where I move about, swap strings. Ooh. Yeah, the dreaded spider exercise that I sent Mike once. Do you remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
That one. Do that, and then, so bearing in mind this is all alternate picks, I then do a directional one. So like down, 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 up, 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 up. So I'm focusing really, kind of everything is focused on this hand really down. Depending on how quick you want to do that, but everything with a metronome. And then I will normally do some specialist ones, things like cross picking, where it's basically alternate picking, but so down, up, down, just to get used to alternate picking quickly between strings, because obviously here when we're alternate picking, we've got 4 notes per string, whereas sometimes when you're soloing, you sometimes just want 1 or 2. So I think things like that really help. And then I do other hybrid bits. But then I would go into, so that'd be my warm-up, done, cool. And then I would like kind of take a look of what I need to do. If I've got sessions or things like that I need to work on, I'd work on those. If there's scales and stuff, I'd be like, right, I want to work on this scale, and then I'm going to put a backing track on and see if I can make some phrases out of it and make it applicable. And, you know, or if it's a chord progression, it's like, how else can I voice this chord progression? You know, or could I do some, you know, and just figure other ways of doing the same thing, because I think it's very easy to kind of, you know, just get stuck in the rut of just working on one thing. But yeah, and then everything, whatever I do, I always will apply it to a song or something that I'm working on, because otherwise these scales and stuff, if you just run the shapes, you don't really memorize them until you start having to use them and think about them. So always applying everything I do is really, really important to me. But this goes on for hours, and there's loads of other stuff that I do. I like to actively listen as well. So I'll listen to stuff. So this is stuff that you can do without your guitar, and just see if you can work out the chord progression or at least guess it. This takes a lot of time, but if you think, oh, that sounds like a G chord, that's an E minor chord, that's a C chord, and you know, even if it's not in the right key, you can put a capo on and see if you can figure out where it is and things like that, because it really trains your ear. And I think there was the Joe Exotica one from Tiger King. Someone's like, do you know how to play this? And it was just that's just E minor and G, E minor, G, and then there's a C. And I was like, yeah, I do know how to play this. And it's a very useful skill.
There's that, I wake up, I go to work, G in it. That's all I know.
Exactly. So
I know those songs a bit too well.
yeah, you do. So yeah, that's kind of how I would do my practice. But at the start of every week, it's easier if you've got a fixed schedule. Mine isn't necessarily fixed. I literally look through my diary. I'm like, cool, I can do this here, and this here, and just asking yourself, how much can I realistically do? if you say I'm going to practice 6 hours a day every day, sometimes that's not a thing.
Mm.
I mean, for most people. Let's put it like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, Mike, have you got anything you want to add onto that, or?
No, mine is very, very, very much the same. It's a big part of different picking. This one always, and any kind of variation on it, and then something string skippy. But I can't remember what I was thinking of now. No, what? Sorry, Jimmy. What? Just what you were saying about planning it out, and it's one of the most important things in the G4 method books is your weekly schedule, because of mine is, my weeks are the same most of the time unless I've got some gigs, but you know, I'm really out, you know, staying overnight that frequently for gigs, and I've set myself, the big difference for me practicing more than I ever have is actually picking, I just have, I've got 4 days a week I practice, and it's the days I work in the afternoon, so I have the mornings. I get up at 7 and start practicing about 8, between 8 and 10 usually. And but just having that, it's not just a routine, but this is what I do. This is what I do on these days, and it's really not, you know, my expectations of what I'd like from the students is, you know, 15 minutes after school for a lot of the kids. And I think that could be fit in pretty easily, you know, 3 times a week even would be, you know, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And a lot of people with that kind of practice would be able to get pretty far for sure, and do pretty well.
Yeah, I think you're right, isn't it? It's about having it as part of your routine. So the first thing is you need to know when you're going to practice, and then the second thing is you need to know what you're going to practice. And the G4 method's great for that, because you know, when people say to me, what do I need to practice, I say, well, what have you got ticked off on your checklist? You know, what have you not got ticked off? Are there any gaps? Like that's what you need to be practicing. But yeah, like there were a few things that you said there, Jimmy, having a variation of stuff. You don't just want to be doing the same thing for, you know, even for 15-20 minutes, you don't want to be doing the same thing. So that's why we always recommend some kind of warm up. And you know, I think something that people forget is that, you know, this is all about playing music. So, you know, we're learning guitar, but and obviously we're learning all of these skills, but the whole purpose of this is so we can play music. So while it's great to go through the method as quickly as possible and get all your scales and arpeggios and everything ticked off, if you're not using them, you're not doing anything with them, you know, you can forget them. I use the learning a language analogy, because I'm still attempting to learn Spanish. But you know, I got muy bien. I got quite good at one point, and then, you know, and then I let it slip, and then I realized that a lot of things that I had learned I'd forgotten. So unless you're using it in the context, you know, like, why are you learning anything? Why are you learning a language? So you can speak it and be understood. Why are you learning an instrument? So you can play music, you know, whether that's just on your own or with other people. So you mentioned playing along to backing tracks, which I think is awesome, especially if you're learning scales, because everyone knows that scale practice can get a bit boring and a bit tedious. But if you're playing a C major, what's that?
You're just not going to remember it if you just run the shape. You know, you want to start using them.
Yeah, but if you're learning, say, a C major scale, you know, go onto YouTube, find a backing track in the key of C major, play along to that. It's going to sound much more interesting.
And something I used to do with the because of probably for about 15 years, the only scale I ever used for soloing was the minor pentatonic.
Yeah.
And you know, when I was a teenager, what I used to do is I used to put on a record of, like, you know, however many songs are on it, 12 songs or something, and every single song I just,
like an old-fashioned album.
Yeah. And I just used to sit there and have my pentatonic and go like, I know it sounds rubbish there, move it up a fret.
Yeah, I used to do
it sounds rubbish there, and you keep going until it sounds good, and then you mess about with it, and then the next one comes on, you find where it sounds good and mess about with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. That's really, really good.
But would it be cool? Yeah, Sev, yeah, absolutely. That's more than fine. I don't know the best way to do that. I can either post it in the group with tabs, or I can just email it as an MP4.
Oh, we can have a chat about that.
Yeah.
Maybe you could, Sev, if you want to see a full 6-hour video of Jimmy's practice routine, I'm sure we can do that for you.
Yeah. One other thing I would add about practice is that there is definitely a difference between stuff you're doing to improve technique rather than to improve musicality. Yeah. So when you're, you know, trying to like work on your phrasing, work on a solo or something like that, you know, like you need to be dedicated. You really need to be listening to what you're doing. You know, like when you're hearing your sounds of a scale being played over, does that work? You know, does that work over the context of what I'm doing? But sometimes you don't actually need to do that, especially if you're working on some of these right hand techniques. So there's a few. I think Mike and I were speaking about this maybe last year when we were both going through a weird hybrid picking phase where we're just like, yeah, and kind of getting some of these techniques down. And a couple of things, you know, if you're learning a specific technique where it just requires repetition, stick Netflix on. I've started rewatching One Tree Hill because I'm a massive emo from 10 years ago, apparently. But they're 40 minutes episodes, and that's just 40 minutes me going, just working out different picking patterns, and got my metronome going on the side, and it's just like I can zone out because it's so repetitive. But that's just 40 minutes of practice solidly on one thing whilst watching a TV show, and you know, it adds up. You know, I wouldn't do that for all your practice, you know, but just for if you're working on a specific technique, especially if you want to do some of the country stuff that Mike's been doing, just sitting with Netflix, just with the metronome going on the side, and just zone out and just keep doing it until it becomes so automatic that when you kind of turn it off, you're like, oh, actually, it's automatic and it's fine. Yeah, that would be my other note to add. Practice with Netflix.
Excellent. Yeah, multitasking. All right, guys. Well, I think we'll leave it there. I think we've answered all the questions. So yeah, everyone who's watching, thank you very much, and thanks for the questions as well. I'm going to try and get some special guests on in future Facebook Lives. I've got a few ideas to join us. So yeah, we'll be here same time next week. Sev says perhaps just a short 15-minute warm. Okay, she doesn't want the full 6 hours.
You disappoint me, Sev. You disappoint me. I thought you were gonna be, you know, like my new little protege doing 6 hours a day, but evidently not.
Fair enough.
Fine.
Yeah, so we're going to be here every Friday for however long we have to be in. It's a beautiful day, so I think I'm going to go out and enjoy what's left of the sunshine. And anything to add, guys, before we finish?
No, it's all good.
Lovely. We will see you all same time next week. Jimmy, over to you.
Over to me, what?
You need to.
Yes, I do.
You need to take us off Facebook.
Very well. So, to our viewers,
Bye.
goodbye. Ciao for now.
Ciao for now.
And we're stopped.
And you need to stop the recording as well.
Oh yeah, we do.